Everybody, welcome to the For the Town podcast. My name is Brian Doback, and I'm the pastor at Streamsong Church. And man, we are for Doylestown. And on this podcast, as you know, we seek to discover the God-given creativity, the drive, and the passions of people and leaders within the Doylestown and Central Bucks community. And we do this by interviewing the whole gamut of people, all walks of life, philanthropists, entrepreneurs, educators, business leaders, people in governance, and employees of all levels. And we want to celebrate them and highlight their particular role in the community and really give you a path on how to connect with them. So today we have none other than Mayor Ron Strouse. Should I call you Mayor Ron or just Ron? How you doing, Ron?
Just Ron's fine.
Great.
Ron's fine.
Thanks so much.
There are a lot of people in Doylestown who consider themselves the mayor. God forbid that I would say that they're not, but so anything's fine.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, man. Thank you. I really appreciate your time because I'm sure that you're getting pulled in a lot of different directions, and to just give some time to our direction, I really appreciate it. I'd love to just, like I was saying, I want you to just really be relaxed and take your mayor hat off for, 45 minutes or less and just be Ron. I think you deserve a break. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. You have a family, kids, married, what's going on with all that?
Well, I grew up in Doylestown, and I can honestly say that my father's family came to Bucks County in the early 1700s.
Wow.
I'm the youngest of four. My father was the youngest of 12. So I actually have a grandfather who I never met, whose name was Ulysses Grant Strouse, who was born in 1865 at the end of the Civil War, when it was a very popular name to give to your offspring.
Wow.
So, and by the way, he lived not in Doylestown, but he lived close by in Plumstead Township, and Ulysses had a grist mill and a general store. Obviously, when I grew up, and back then too, but I mean, when I grew up, Doylestown was a very, very different community. It was a community that basically served the farming industry all around it for miles and miles. I went to Central Bucks. It didn't have a west at the end of it. And yes, we had a graduating class of 365, but it was a very different environment at that time. It was, in some ways, it was very conservative. In some ways, it reflected the background, the historic background of the people who lived here, Quakers, the Pennsylvania Dutch, or the German and Dutch influence, and there was a lot of that, and it changed dramatically. I'd have to say, as a community, when I was growing up, Doylestown was going through some tough spots when I was in school, in junior high and high school. It was going through some really economic difficulty. That was the era in the 60s when we were building bypasses around towns like Doylestown, and we did around Doylestown, and those bypasses would tend to kill the community because they were creating the opportunities to go around them. And then adding to that were shopping centers and shopping malls, which was a new creation then. It was that kind of community that was beginning to struggle because the economics were changing, because the only government assistance that was available to help small towns like that actually encouraged you to tear down buildings that were historic in the middle of town. The old courthouse, the Rotunda, is a product of that period. And of course, there are lots of people around who say that's the ugliest building around. But obviously a lot has changed since then, and we can talk about that in terms of change. I also need to tell you that, while I think we're a community that embraces diversity, we're not particularly diverse compared to many, and we weren't back then. I think when I was in high school, we had 2 African American families that had kids in high school. It just so happens that we had a spectacular football team that won statewide honors, and the quarterback was an African American quarterback. Made him by the name of Duckett, made him a very popular guy back then. But we didn't have a lot of diversity in the community for sure.
Yeah.
So that's changed dramatically, and it's changed as the town has changed. We have different economic inputs into the town than we had back then. Obviously, the farming industry is a small part of it. Yeah, our Friday or Saturday farmers market is very popular, but clearly the farming industry is much smaller than it was back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then and you cut me off when I'm talking too much about myself. So I went to I probably fled. When I applied to undergraduate school, on reflection, and I didn't recognize it then, I only applied to city schools, and I went to undergraduate school in Washington, and then later New York. I probably fled for something that was in my perception back then more exciting than what I found here. But the town changed dramatically over the years, and while we'll talk about the struggles we're facing right now, apart from that, it's a town that is extraordinarily vibrant with very talented people who live here and who work here, with resources to address problems that we might have. A very different town.
Yeah, that's man. It's really interesting to hear how the change has happened, and then also how your own family just goes way back. That's incredible. I love history, so I like hearing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What's going on? Tell me about how you're married. How long have you been married, and you got kids? And
I don't have kids, and
okay.
I should tell you, Brian, I am married to a guy.
Oh, okay.
I have been partnered for 45 years and married for 5.
Yeah.
To the same person. Now that that is part of who I am. It does not define who I am by any means.
Yeah.
And it's the experience of my life, of course.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I'm curious. I'm always taking advice because I'm married to my wife Stephanie, and we have 2 kids. But regarding marriage, I'm just always taking advice. What are you learning? In being married to somebody? I mean, it's because it's not easy.
No matter who you're married to, 45 years is. I mean, on reflection, it's great, but at the same time, you always have to say it's not easy. I mean, take all the young parents today who are experiencing teaching their children at home for a long period of time. That's not easy. I hear about that all the time.
Yeah.
And juggling those kinds of challenges, and sometimes working from home as well. I mean, it's not. In my case, I had my first primary job. I had a short job where I was a what's known as a corporate risk analyst for Pfizer. But apart from that, my first big job actually was working in Washington with the House of Representatives. I was hired by the House of Representatives to be a legislative assistant, and within a year, through great opportunities, I became the youngest chief of staff in Washington in the House of Representatives. Worked there for 6 years, which maybe has something to do with being mayor. I don't know, but anyway, that was an era when the politics was a lot less acrimonious than it is today. I happen to have worked for a guy as chief of staff who was known as back then as a Rockefeller Republican. What then was known as a progressive Republican.
Yeah.
And of course, we worked with other Republicans. We worked across the aisle. We did things in bipartisan spirit. Those things don't occur so well today. But that's sort of my political training and real training. But then I was taught. He believed. He's still with us. He became a attorney general for the state of Pennsylvania, and then a judge, and he's retired, of course, for a long time. He believed that you should sort of repot yourself, not to be confused with any kind of green plant. You should repot yourself to grow, and every 10 years, something like that. So after working for the House of Representatives for 6 years, I went to chef school and had a couple restaurants.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I appreciate your adaptability and your willingness to change and do something different. Because
that gets hard as you get older. I recognize that. I mean, you get invested into whatever your career is.
Yeah,
and it gets hard to change. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like you're talking about defining and what defines us. If what you do defines you, then you would be much less willing to change and to maybe change your career, But if it doesn't define who you are, then you have flexibility to kind of work here, work there, try this out, try that out. So I really appreciate that flexibility.
Yeah, and it's not about changing what ethics you abide by, what codes you abide by. It's not that. It's the world's experiences that also help you become a better person. Those experiences are important. So I went to a restaurant school in Philadelphia, went to a chef school in Paris, and then there was a well-known American chef and cookbook author named James Beard, and I cooked with him for a while. And then had these 2 consecutive hotel restaurants for 20 years. And then that brought me to getting involved in Doylestown in a big way.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Ron. My wife and kids, we're going to come over and enjoy your cooking. So we're inviting ourselves over. No.
Yeah, it might be on the grill out back.
Yeah, I'm curious. So, how it sounds like you didn't really aspire to be mayor of Doylestown. It just kind of maybe just happened. How did that all kind of come about and becoming mayor?
Well, I was involved in the community. I had been at different levels. I had been on the board and president of the board of the County Theater, which was at that time starting up as a art movie house. And I was also chairman of the board of Visit Bucks County, which was the tourist promotion agency for the county. And in Doylestown, I was both chairing the new Human Relations Council, which had just been created by Borough Council, and I was also chairing Doylestown's Economic Development Commission. And by the way, both of those at the moment are both very important, have very important roles in a community like ours. So I had been involved, and I was actually mayor wasn't on my radar. I was actually asked if I would consider running. I had no clue what was involved.
Wow.
Because we have, in Pennsylvania, we have what's called a weak mayor system, which I hate hearing that now. But and what that actually means is that the borough council has all of the legislative authority and some of the administrative authority. And my primary responsibilities have to do with oversight of police functions. Now, in reality, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot different than that. It's without much routine, frankly. And of course, in today's climate, it's taken on a whole different meaning.
Mm.
And by the way, something I never knew when I was first elected, I'm asked to perform marriages.
Mm-hmm. No, I didn't know that. No.
I didn't either. And in the 7 years I've been mayor, I'm in my second term, toward the end of my second term. I have performed over 300 marriages.
300? Wow.
Yes. Now, they're all very special. Each one is absolutely very special, but I don't really want them to involve too much of my time. I don't really want to be invited to the reception.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's very exciting. It's sometimes of course these are couples who perhaps want a civil ceremony for whatever reason. Sometimes they involve a translator.
Yeah.
We have I can actually perform marriages anywhere in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
We have in Lower Bucks County and into Northeast Philadelphia, we have a large Ukrainian and Russian population. Sometimes someone will ask me to perform a ceremony and they'll have a translator. Mm-hmm. We have a Latino population just north of Doylestown, mm-hmm. and they have asked, and they sometimes provide a translator as well.
That's a lot of marriages. I'll tell you what, my wife loves receptions. You might be able to do 300, but I couldn't do 300. That's insane.
There was a mayor 30 years ago, and when I read his obituary, it said, and I had already been mayor then, it said he had performed thousands. And so then I had to go back real quick and find out how long he had been mayor. Made me kind of nervous.
I'll tell you what, I only do, and I'm fine with it. It's all I want to do, but I do maybe like 1 or 2 per year.
Yeah.
Whew, man. Hey, I'm curious, with your history in Doylestown, and things have changed so much. Like something really simple. I mean, what's your like favorite restaurant right now in Doylestown? Like, where do you love to go just to fill up?
In the environment we're in right now, everyone is a favorite restaurant. I mean, the restaurants are struggling. We all know that. Mm-hmm. And of course, now we will be entering what's known as the yellow phase this weekend. Yeah. Where they're going to be permitted to provide very limited outdoor seating. It's our hope that the yellow phase is relatively short and that we can create a safe environment going forward. So we are very anxious to help them in any way we can in a safe manner to succeed, because we know that without that help and without the support of the community, some of them will fail. 1 or 2 have already announced that. So I guess I'm not going to tell you that answer right out.
That's okay.
We have restaurants with incredible diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a short period of time when actually the only major ethnic restaurant we didn't have in town for a short period of time was a Chinese restaurant, which was unbelievable. Mm. Now that's not true at the moment, but we have, we have Latino restaurants, we have French, Italian, of course,
Indian,
creative American, Indian.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
My favorite restaurant, my wife and I, it seems to be always whatever the last restaurant we went to is our favorite, because every restaurant's like really good.
Yeah.
And right before the pandemic hit, we had gone to Damani Star. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it was really good. And we were just like, man, like we want to go back there again after this pandemic clears up. But yeah, so many good restaurants.
Yeah, Quinoa serves a ceviche of which is dynamite. It's a little hot, which is great. I mean, you can go down the list. You want to go here for that and here for something else and so forth.
I'm so sorry to hear that Zenden closed.
Yes.
I loved going there, and that was where you and I first met.
We
Was
met
at the
there,
Zen
exactly.
Den. I was bummed to
Exactly.
hear that.
Yeah.
That's too
Yeah.
bad.
It is too bad, and we don't want to see that happen. And frankly, if we see closures like that, it's going to be a while before um, before they're replaced by someone else.
Yeah.
Because the climate for starting up a business going forward, even if we can keep our businesses going, is not great.
It's
It's not
expensive
a healthy
too.
climate. You
Yeah.
know, I think we'll do better than most communities, and
Hmm.
and there are a lot of reasons for that. And some of it is, people, being very supportive
Hmm.
of all sorts of things we do.
Yeah.
Um, there are lots of things that occur within the community that we haven't been able to do this spring, including community cleanup, where your congregation has been very engaged in
Yeah. Trying to be.
volunteering.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is great. But obviously, those are things we haven't been able to do,
Yeah.
and perhaps won't for a little while. But that doesn't mean we can't find ways to be supportive of the community too.
Yeah. What's your? I'm curious. It can be anything. What are like your three favorite things? I mean, it could be anything. What's tell me about your three favorite things.
My three favorite locations.
No, just things. Just like
Thing.
it could be ice cream or going for walks or the beach, whatever. Like, what are your three favorite things?
Well, until last year, I built a place in Maine for 20 some years. I mean, there's Maine and then there's Maine. In this case, when I drove, it took me 11 and a half hours, because when I got to the New Hampshire Maine border, I had another 4-hour drive. But once you got there, it was drop dead wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Small community called Stonington produced 10% of Maine's lobsters, this little town. So that there were, lobstermen and artists, a whole conglomeration of people. But you could hike, you could kayak onto the water. I could kayak onto the ocean, which was dotted with lots of different islands. So it didn't have the wave action that you associate with parts of the ocean, and get within 40 feet of a seal and some really exciting things.
That's
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
but I didn't have much time to go there. I'll have to be honest. I didn't mind driving the distance.
I think you're blocking your speaker a little bit.
If you drive up and spend 3 nights and drive back, it's a little long.
It
It's a
is,
little
yeah.
long.
We went to
Yeah.
Maine maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I forget what it was called, but it was right on the coast.
Yeah.
Maybe 45 minutes past the border of New Hampshire, but it was
Yeah.
really nice. I really enjoyed it. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of um, New England clam chowder,
Oh,
and
there you go.
it was the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where we went to have that, it was phenomenal.
Well, you can buy lobsters at Acme for Memorial Day, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't compare with going down to the dock and buying lobsters from the guy who pulled them out of the water, or the
Yeah,
girl who put them out of the water.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's very exciting. But we have this incredible feature in Doylestown that we can honestly say without any hesitation is unique to Doylestown. Of course, that's the Mercer Museum and Font Hill,
mm-hmm.
and Font Hill in particular is very special to me, because my best friend in elementary school and junior high school lived around the corner, so we would play around Font Hill, and at that time, Henry Mercer's housekeeper had life rights, and she was continuing to live there. And she, part of the arrangement is she was required somehow to give tours, which she evidently hated to do. and, and being bad kids that we were, we would throw a pebble at the window and she would come to the door and yell at us. Well, you know what Fonthill looks like, and she was the witch in the castle. So my memories are also fond, but I mean that's an incredible unique feature of Doylestown.
Yeah.
That really is wonderful.
What are curious, what are as mayor, again, I'm just fascinated by just the experience it must be to be the leader of a town or a city. What are your like greatest challenges as mayor?
Well, of course, right now the challenges are tremendous.
Yeah.
And the challenges, of course, are the pandemic. And the pandemic was a challenge for any community, maybe more so for us because right in Doylestown we have 4 nursing facilities, and right outside of the community we have 2 very large ones, and they were all dramatically impacted with terrible, heart-wrenching stories. And of course we're still dealing with that, and we're trying to deal with it in a way that is sensitive to the fact that we're not through it yet, that we have to take precautions. But then there's the economic disturbance that this has created, and that has been equally dramatic. And of course we're really only beginning to deal with that, and that occurs not just so there's a challenge there because the economics of municipal government is undermined. We don't yet know to what extent, but all the things that go into funding municipal services, whether they be the earned income tax or the real estate transfer tax or parking fees, all of those in some way are dramatically affected in a negative way. So the resources available to the borough are reduced, and at the same time, the demands is a strong word, but the responsibilities of the borough to help the residents and the business community have increased tremendously, and that's the vice we find ourselves in. I had the opportunity to be on a call with Senator Casey the day before yesterday, and that's of course what I needed to lay out for him. And communities of our size don't receive federal funding or state funding to deal with that, but yet we're the front line to deal with that. So what we've been doing is, in this case, we've been having a series of Zooms with the merchants, and then also with the restaurants, and the restaurants also separately because they have a different kind of challenge in some ways, in creative ways, trying to come up with ideas that will help the merchants, that we can move away from some of the zoning restrictions that we have in the past to help merchants going forward and help restaurants going forward. So an example, like if you were to have a restaurant with a parking lot, not necessarily in the middle, directly in the middle of town, but let's say toward the shopping center or further out, you would be required normally to maintain a certain number of parking spaces for you, the size of your restaurant. So we are going to move away from that by resolution for a period of time so that you can actually create dining in your parking lot, and you won't have to have the same amount of spaces.
That's great.
We're going to close a couple parks, parking lots specifically. We're talking about some closures on State Street to give merchants a chance to move outside, because we know it's healthier to be outside, frankly, as long as you have social distancing. So we're doing that. Still in the working stage, but we're going to get there in the next couple of weeks for sure. So those are, of course, those are challenges that none of us have ever dreamed of. None of us have ever dreamed of.
I'm curious. Oh, sorry.
No,
I was just going to say, I was curious, as far as challenges go. You were saying earlier, you get about 400 emails a day.
Yeah.
I mean, Are those emails, do they consist of decisions that have to be made, suggestions and stuff like that? Because that's a challenge, having to communicate so much on that level. 400 emails. That's
Well, there's a lot of talent here, and yes, there are suggestions that are made, and sometimes I smile, but I mean, these suggestions by and large are good. Some I've heard many times before. Some are creative and new, and that's part of being a vibrant community. Of course, right now, the challenges, specifically over the last week, have taken a different tone, and that's actually, there's a African American saying that I've been using this week: "Trouble in the land," and of course, trouble in the land refers to dark times, and of course, that's what we're having right now, and that impacts our community in major ways as well. Since we're the county seat, chances are, if there's going to be a rally or a demonstration or a protest outside of a major city like Philadelphia, if it's going to take place in Bucks County, it's going to take place in Doylestown, because we're the county seat, and that's absolutely fine, and sometimes it's more than fine, because sometimes elected officials don't move sufficiently unless they hear in a forceful way.
Yeah.
That's not to suggest we have tin ears or anything like that, but this is important conversation to have right now, and it's important to hear. And so some of those emails are very impassioned emails about that, and they can come from, a junior high school student at Lenape.
Wow,
Or,
that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely cool. So sometimes, and this is a young lady that emailed me yesterday. She probably would have preferred to text me, but she emailed me yesterday, and she got a response back from me. But I'm afraid that if she looks at the timeline, that response came like at about 11:30 last night. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a while.
What are some like misconceptions do you think people might have of like a mayor or just somebody in your position, that you, or maybe just you as the mayor? What are some misconceptions that you would love to maybe address to people? Or
well, there's a misconception of perhaps of power. I don't have any power.
Yeah.
It's the opportunity to influence,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be the opportunity to influence borough council, to influence our paid borough staff,
Mm-hmm.
to influence a state representative, to influence Senator Casey the day before yesterday. A lot of it is to influence, because at the end of the day, whatever decision is made, you want it to be made in the most thoughtful way possible, and you want it to be in the best interest of everyone, and you want people to buy into it, that it is the right decision that you've made. And that takes conversation. That takes you have to listen, and you have to question. You have to be willing to change your mind, and that is what the political process should be. It often is not. I understand that, but that's what it should be. It should aspire to be that, in my mind.
Yeah, that's good. I'm curious, what's something that you what do you really love about your job?
I like it all.
Yeah.
I do. I like engaging with the people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I talk about a dynamic community, I mean, we have people who, like me, had grandparents who lived here. There are people here who went to high school with me.
Yeah.
And then there are people who moved in last week. And, they have, in my mind, they have equal opportunity to engage in the kind of community we have and the decisions we make.
Yeah.
people don't know that about 40% of Doylestown Borough are renters.
Oh.
And now that's skewed a little bit because we have a senior community and
Mm-hmm.
uh, Wesley, but occasionally someone will say, well, they only rent. Well, that makes no difference at all.
Mm-hmm.
They have absolutely the same rights and the same opportunities to engage in our community as anyone else,
Amen.
as the people who have lived here for 50 years or whatever else.
Mm.
So, and as a result of having that kind of, and by the way, that adds to our diversity and it adds to the depth of our community. So I think I like hearing from them. We have down the street, we have a incubator called Stacks,
Mm-hmm.
which is mostly millennials, not entirely, who are young business people.
Yeah.
With sometimes unusual and exciting ideas on what a business should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And they have every Wednesday morning, they have an opportunity to have coffee, listen to a couple presenters who are new business people in the area. I think you have to be in business less than 5 years. There's give and take in terms of the challenges of the new business and the people in the audience. It is absolutely exciting.
That's awesome.
It really is. It really. I mean, it's not bricks and mortar businesses by and large. Sometimes they get into technology and they lose my focus entirely because I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's very exciting.
That's great. I'm curious. During this pandemic, it's really putting everybody in a position to just slow down, stop, maybe just like reflect a little bit more. I know I have. I'm curious. What are you learning about yourself during this stoppage? This great weird time of just slowing down.
Perhaps how inadequate I am.
Mm.
There's a lot of that. I mean, these challenges mean that none of us are going to come out of it whole.
Oh yeah.
None of us are going to come out of it winners. Because they are challenges that are incredibly different. It's as much as it's important to learn from history, as much as it's important to learn from our forefathers and what transpired before. We don't have much to go by here.
Yeah.
We're going to, in terms of the revitalization we've been talking about, so there was a revitalization effort in 1964, and it's called Operation 64. There was a small community celebration of this revitalization effort last year. We're looking at that for comparisons as to how we can model our current revitalization on that.
Yeah.
And that will be helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but only partially.
Mm-hmm.
It's a challenge going forward.
Yeah.
Very much so. People though have new interests that they've learned to pursue in the time of this pandemic.
Yeah.
We have 2 community gardens.
Mm-hmm.
One has been here for 20 years. It has about 22 plots. And the other one is only a couple years old and has 18 plots. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? They now have long waiting lists.
Oh.
Because gardening is a great opportunity when there's a lot you can't do.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And of course, there had to be all sorts of provisions in terms of staying safe.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, they have become very popular activities in the borough.
Well, I have another question for you before we wrap up here. During this pandemic, it's easy to complain about stuff. It's easy to find all the bad in it. And surely there is struggles. There's bad things about it, but during this time, despite the pandemic, what are you grateful for?
Well, most of all, I'm grateful for being here in Doylestown because there are a lot of communities that don't have the resources that we have. And when I say resources, yes, there are financial resources that other communities simply lack. But the resources that are the fabric of our community, the faith-based resources, absolutely. I have never before had the opportunity to zoom in on different services on Sunday morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And while I can't say that I do them all, I have taken the opportunity to.
Sure.
So there's from my standpoint, there's a positive side to that. But I'm told, I've never been able to document this. I'm told that outside of Philadelphia, our region has the largest number of nonprofits anywhere in Pennsylvania. Now, there are all sorts of, sometimes they're a nonprofit to benefit a single disadvantaged person, or sometimes they're a museum or a church, or but that is an indication of the philanthropic involvement of the community on an overwhelming scale, and that is exciting. And that is that and of course, many of those organizations are struggling right now, just like businesses, just like restaurants, and we're going to have to find a way to be supportive of them, because we're not going to have the gala that they had last year, or the chocolate festival, or whatever it is. But I mean, that's the fabric of our community that really resonates with me, and that gives me optimism going forward.
Yeah, man. As we close here, I just wanted to say something I've learned in this with you is I really appreciate. I mean, it would go without saying, you would think a mayor of any town would really have their finger on the pulse of their community. But to actually kind of experience it right now with you and talking to you, what I sense is because I've asked you like individual questions, some personal questions, but I noticed that your answers, they've tended to sprout into more institutional, and that's not a bad thing. I appreciate that. I guess what I'm saying is it kind of shows me that the way you think is like just so much more. I don't know, just like a wider frame of mind than just like yourself. You've answered your questions about yourself, but they've always taken the direction eventually to more institutional. Like, you're really thinking about the community. Like you're like, you really have your finger on the pulse. You know what's happening, what's going on, and stuff like that. So I really appreciate that. It's awesome.
There are a couple phone calls I make late at night, and these are to people that I work with. They may be a member of borough council or someone on the staff of the borough. And that's the call where I say, so how's it going with you? And you have to have that conversation. Even if you're involved. I mean, you need to really reach out on a personal basis and saying, well, how are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing with your free time? What are you reading? Are you taking a walk? How's it going with you? Are you cooking something different than you did before? By the way, I'm cooking different than I ever did before. I just love getting, as part of my email collection, the New York Times daily "What's Cooking," and some of it I'm never going to make, but some of it sounds pretty good, and I'll even print out a copy of a recipe now and then. I mean, ultimately, the conversation has to turn as to how are you doing. I mean, it's like when you greet a person and you'll say, "How are you?" Well, we usually do that in a perfunctory way. But in these times, we need to say it with purpose. And so whatever else is going on, there has to be that conversation. how are you doing, and what does that mean?
That's awesome. So I do want to ask you then, you're prompting me to ask you two quick questions. What are you reading? And I'd love to know, like, are you watching any movies? Because I love movies. Are you watching any movies during this time?
Well, first of all, I'm bored with Netflix.
Okay, yeah.
I feel like I've seen everything I want to see. Now, that's clearly not true.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've seen everything I want to see. So I'm bored with Netflix. And to a certain extent, I can't find what I want to see anymore. I don't know what that is. Now, I could tell you there are a couple trashy things on Netflix I've been watching, and they are trashy, and I sort of wonder why they were made, but that's okay. I'll be honest.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
If it's the hour before bedtime and I really don't want to think about anything else that's been going on, hey, there's something to divert my attention there. So there is that.
Yeah.
Regrettably, the things I like to read are historical fiction or historical novels. And sometimes they're not so uplifting.
Yeah.
So that's the situation right now.
Oh man, Ron, I really appreciate your time. It's been such an awesome conversation and getting to know you a little bit more. Hopefully you were able to take your mayor hat off for a little bit and let loose a little bit and relax. Man, to all the listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mayor Strouse. And you can find these and other podcasts, other episodes on our YouTube channel, For the Town Podcast. We have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram page to stay updated. And you can look forward to the next episode next Monday. Man, thank you so much, Ron.
I enjoyed it. Thanks
really
very much.
Appreciate it. And man, I can't wait to get back into town and start, communing again with people, restaurants and coffee shops.
And we might not go back to Zenden, but we'll find a place to have a cup of coffee.
Well, I want to check out really quick. I want to check out the Native Cafe.
Cafe, absolutely.
That was started by Jeremiah, an employee at the Zenden, and he broke off and started the Native Cafe, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And he was I haven't been there this week, but he was doing takeout last weekend. Yeah. And I know he'll be open now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and look forward to the next podcast. Thanks, Mayor Ron.
Okay. Take care now.
Take care.